Well, welcome to our monthly all hands calls, where we bring together our volunteers, those that can make it. We talk about what's going on at Veterans for All Voters. We hear about what's going on in your states. We build some community. We remind each other that we are the people we've been waiting for, and that this work, while hard, that we do it together, and that we're building a community of folks, common sense folks trying to do the right thing, looking at the system of our government, knowing that the system is misincentivized, and we are, as an organization, looking to realign the incentives so that elected officials, as we like to say, that we get less folks who are performative and more folks who are focused on the policies. We believe in a government that works for everybody. We believe in a system of government in which every registered voter has the right to vote in every taxpayer-funded election, something that over 70% of the American people also support. Actually, I believe over 90%, 91% of the American people also support that. 70% think it's true already. It is not true. And so we're fighting to make that a reality, which unfortunately we're seeing sort of the downstream effects when you don't have a political system that is aligned towards majority will. You get a lot of what we're seeing play out in Congress and in the executive today. So we don't come at this with a political ideology or a partisan ideology. We come at this hoping that the best people in states across the country emerge, that they reflect the majority of voters in those states, and that they act in the interest of the majority of voters in those states, which is not what the closed primary system today does. So we're working to change that. But let me get off my soapbox, and without further ado, I want to kick it over to Alberto Ramos. I think many of you have met Alberto, but Alberto, if you could just do a little introduction of yourself, and then we can get into the conversation around messaging. We have come out of, an interesting is what you say when you got your butt kicked. So we're coming out of an interesting election cycle where several statewide ballot initiatives, which many of you were very involved with, fell short. And so as part of that learning process, us, as well as other national organizations, are doing the necessary postmortem to say what happened, what are we going to learn. One of the things that we're learning is that the messaging has really been off as it relates to talking about election reform. I would say that we sort of had our pulse on that and a sense of that, but the data is sort of irrefutable in terms of how I think off it was. So we are taking all the lessons because we are going to fight more innings. We're doing it right now in legislative fights across the country, in state houses, and then we're also going to be doing it in ballot initiatives again in 2026, which we'll be talking more about. But part of the postmortem is like looking at the messaging, what didn't connect with voters. We know that the American people overwhelmingly don't think that their political system is working. So it was a disconnect for us to say, when given the opportunity to reform it, why would they not be voting to reform it? And so we had to kind of take those lessons as a movement, and the outgrowth of that thinking and dialogue and study is a lot of what Alberto's going to share with us now. So Alberto, over to you, brother.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. It's good to see everyone. Let me just start off by saying I'm in a shared space, so there might be some background noise. I apologize if that's the case. So yeah, just a quick introduction. I see some familiar faces here and some folks I haven't met. I hope that I get a chance to talk with each of you. I'll be sending out an email to our volunteers, encouraging folks to set up one-on-one time. I am originally from Las Vegas, very proudly from Las Vegas. I'm a Navy veteran. I was a submarine officer and ended up in DC for my last tour and have stuck around DC since. I worked for an organization that many of you are probably aware of called New Politics that works with veterans who are running for office. But I also have a unique distinction, having served as a White House fellow in the first Trump administration and as a political appointee at Veterans Affairs in the Biden administration. And so believe very deeply in cross-partisanship and bipartisanship and nonpartisanship, but not partisanship. That's the one thing that I do not believe in. And it is something that I have tried really hard to embody in my own career post-military and during the military, of course, too. So I'm really grateful to be here. I've been here for about a month now and just love this team and the work that you all are doing, especially. So as Todd mentioned, we're going to talk about sort of how we frame our message at Veterans for All Voters, that might feel a little bit basic, and it is in some ways, but it's also very hard. It's a complex task to think about who we are and how we communicate who we are externally. And so some of what we're going to talk about is a little bit of a shift from 2022, 2024 campaign cycles. But at its core, I think it is stuff that all of you have been doing, volunteering in your communities, telling your own stories and talking about why veterans are such an important part of the of this reform movement. Todd kind of previewed this. I want to make sure to say it again. At the end, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to go out into breakout rooms, and we're going to have folks share their stories using some of what we talk about here. Todd and Eric are going to demonstrate what that looks like in this big setting, and then we'll go into smaller group settings. So I'm going to share my screen here. One sec. All right, let me hit present. All right, we'll kick this off. All right, so messaging guide. The other thing I'll say very briefly until we hop in, before we hop into this, is that a lot of this is in draft form. We're speaking in rough draft here. We have, I've spent some time, and the entire team has spent some time reviewing and talking about it. But if there are things that don't ring true to you, or that you might have issue with, or that you want to sort of explore more, like, again, reach out. We'll make sure that you guys have access to this. But we want to make sure that this is the right product for us and our team. So if you guys were on last month's call, we went over these first few slides. I want to reiterate some of these slides quickly because I think they're really important. So this is kind of the big picture of what we're doing right now in reframing our message. We are moving away from talking explicitly about policies, really focusing deeply on ranked choice voting, open primaries. We still care about those things. We're still advocating for those things. But instead of really focusing on the nuances of the policies themselves, we're going to start talking more about values. You see some of what we have there. But we think that values are especially resonant when we use veterans as trusted messengers, talking about why this reform movement is so important. We all know what it means to serve our country, to operate with service above self. And I think that as we think about what reform looks like, we can really bring those values home too. I have a couple of real world examples here, which we very briefly talked about last month, but I want to kind of dive into a little bit more, because I think it'll inform those breakout rooms that we'll get into here in a bit. The first is we need open primaries to increase voter participation. That is true. That's a true fact that we all know and believe in. But when you're talking to the everyday American or the everyday voter, that doesn't mean a whole lot to them. But if instead you use this values-based framework, veterans didn't fight for democracy overseas just to be locked out of elections here at home. Open primaries give all veterans a voice at the ballot box. That unlocks something in their brain that's something different for them as they're thinking about why open primaries are important. You see the same sort of reframing in the example below on ranked choice voting. And folks, if you want to toss questions and stuff in the chat, I can actually see the chat right now, but I'll make sure that we can get to them, and feel free to interrupt me too. I'm going to just briefly touch on this. There's a whole lot more thought underlying each of these ideas. We're going to focus a lot more in this cycle on talking about stories, talking about your story, talking about veteran stories, talking about why this stuff matters to our community and to us individually. We're going to avoid jargon. We're going to focus on action. This isn't something that happens passively. Reforming our democracy, our republic, isn't something that just happens because we're sitting idly by. That's not what veterans do, and that's not what we're going to do at Veterans for All Voters. Partnerships matter. All of you matter immensely. Our volunteers matter more than anything to this movement. And so we're going to talk a lot about those partnerships, about the folks who are on the ground doing the work. And oftentimes, I think many campaigns, including the Reform campaign, has kind of approached this from a top-down conversation, kind of talking at voters, talking at Americans about why these policies matter, how they're going to change our democracy, why this stuff's important. But what we really need, and especially as a grassroots organization, is for American people, for veterans, to really understand why this matters in our communities. I'm not going to go through this line by line, but one of the things, it was, again, kind of an unlock for me in a conversation Todd, Eric, and I were just having last week, was thinking about what we're for and what we're against. And at Veterans for All Voters, where, I forget the exact framing Eric uses, radical collaborators or something along those lines, we believe really deeply in partnering with folks, in doing work with people, and making friends in this process. But that doesn't mean that there aren't things that we're not against. And there's a bunch of double negatives there, but we are against some things. We're against zero-sum politics and extreme worldviews. We're against sort of this manufactured division in our country, and you'll see the list there. But I think it's important for us to think about the things that we're against so that we can provide an optimistic, forward-looking view of the things that we're for. And so you see the list there. Those are things that we'll be talking about a lot. Again, the things that we're for, but that requires understanding and being really intimately aware of the things that we're against too. So this is kind of what we're working on as kind of our core VAV message for the 2025 year. Veterans took an oath to defend our republic abroad. Now we're fighting to strengthen it here at home. At Veterans for All Voters, we're building a nationwide movement of veterans working to restore trust in democracy, ensure elections are fair, open, and competitive, so every American's voice is heard, not just a handful few. We won't settle for anything less. Again, call to action, talking about values, really framing this in a values-oriented way instead of a policy-oriented way. There are kind of some underlying key messages. We have our core message, and then you have your underlying key messages. I'm not going to go again and talk through these quotes. We'll make sure you have these slides, but we want to make sure it's very clear that this movement is veteran-led, that this big win in New Mexico is because of people like Claudia Reisner, and those big wins that we see across the country because veterans are there showing up and demonstrating why these things are important. We want to talk about the ways in which veterans represent America. That when we served with people who looked wildly different from us, who came from wildly different places. I am from Las Vegas, and my first roommate was from Rhode Island. And I swear on everything, I could not understand a word he said for like the first 3 months we lived together. But that's part of the power of having served in the military, is serving with people who come from every background and belief. And that's part of the power of this movement too. Political dysfunction disproportionately affects veterans. You guys all know these statistics. We talk about, this is an important statistic to really highlight. Half of veterans identify as independent, and that means that they can't participate in our democracy in the same ways that everybody else can. All veterans deserve a say. We're approaching the 250th anniversary in 2026. And so we want to focus on that and the role that veterans played. Our founding fathers were all veterans. And so we think this is a moment in time where we can really highlight the role that veterans played in starting our democracy, continuing to protect it over the past 250 years, and reforming what it ends up looking like. And then again, a strong call to action. We want to make sure that we're always talking to people about what this looks like as an active movement rather than a passive one. We have some key stats here. I'm not going to run through these again. These are things that you guys have probably heard a lot. We still want to talk about statistics. We just want to make sure that we're framing them through our stories and the work that we do. So we've already been using this framework in 2025, and it's been really cool to see over the past month. Many of you have been submitting written testimony or providing in-person testimony. in states across the country that are trying to ban ranked choice voting, that are coming together to try to push for open primaries. We've been working with folks to help pull together that written testimony to provide ideas and thoughts, and that's something that I'm really energized by. But we've been using this new framework to think about what that testimony looks like. And we've heard from others who have kind of just been listening in that they've appreciated the change to this values-oriented framework, that it's impactful and really brings people together. So I won't read it here, but you see it in Oregon, Ohio, Rhode Island, Maine. We actually haven't written this specifically on the Let America Vote Act, but an example of how we use this values-oriented framework to talk about something that's happening nationally too. And there are many other states that we've been working in over the past month where we've been trying to create this new story and narrative around the democracy reform movement. So we're about to get to the part where we all share. And as I mentioned, Todd and Eric are going to kind of tell their stories here in this big group, and then we'll kind of split out into small groups. And then unfortunately, I have to hop off. But look forward to talking with everybody. This first line on personalizing your message is the most important, and I'm happy to work with each of you, to talk to each of you about what that story and narrative looks like. But we want to make sure we're doing this as much as possible at Veterans for All Voters, that we're capturing our stories, and that as you're getting out in your community, you're really telling them. So tell your military story. And so for so many people, that might be challenging or painful or, you know, a difficult thing to do. But it is important to think about your military story in relation to the work that we're doing. And then think about your transition into the community after you left the military and became a veteran. Both of those things inform why we're all here on this call right now. It informs why you come to work every day to do this really important work in this really critical time. And after you've told that story, again, statistics, facts, you know, that those sort of more nuanced things are okay, as long as it's framed from a values-oriented perspective. So you see here, I'm just making this up for the sake of making it up. Eric would know the exact numbers, but let's say in Pennsylvania, 1.2 million voters don't have a say in primaries, effectively deciding most races. That's not a small problem. It's the system working exactly as designed for a powerful few. So you've included this as a powerful statistic, but you're tying it to a value, and that's what we want to do as much as we can. And then you could see the rest of the points there. Today in the breakout rooms, we're really going to focus on this first bullet point, thinking through your military story, your transition into your community, why it connects you to this work, and why you care deeply about what we're doing here. So now it's time to practice. You see here kind of the framework. Tell your story in about 30 to 60 seconds. I know we all, you know, opportunities to get to know one another are great, and I hope we have more of them, and we will have more of them. But try to keep it to about 30 to 60 seconds and tell your why for joining Veterans for All Voters, for doing this work, and then try to find a clear and concise call to action. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to stop talking too, and read through some of these comments that have been coming through. I'm going to turn it over to Todd first, if you want to just share your story of what brings you to this work.
Sure. Thanks, Roberto. I was gonna make Eric go first, but I'll give him a beat. You know, and I'll be honest, I struggle a little bit with this because my inclination is to dive into the technical functions, because part of what I find so intellectually compelling about our work is that there's so many emotional appeals, mostly driven by the two parties, mostly driven by outrage. And so I have sort of like a natural rejection to emotional frames, because I think it's part of why we're in this mess, and that what we're talking about are very specific changes that if you change the incentive, the mechanics of an election have a dramatic impact on the outcome of elections, and then the nature of candidates and how they behave. So I will admit that this is a little bit hard for me. Here's my 30-second pitch. You know, serving in the military and then working with veterans since the military, I've been surrounded and inspired on a daily basis on how talented, thoughtful, collaborative, kind veterans are, as well as the American people are. And when I turn on the news, I see an absolute split screen of the lowest common denominator of bad behavior amongst adults, which to me feels like just a distortion of the America I know and love, the veterans I know and love, and the political system that we're subject to. And with my own research, come to find out, digging into the election systems, that our election systems exclude the least partisan among us, ban nonpartisans in many elections. And so it's no wonder in a system that excludes or bans the least partisan among us from voting and participating that we are subject to a system that is the most partisan. And that is a wrong that we have to right. And just as every other generation of Americans has done, we have a task in front of us, which is to do our part to restore the American experiment for future generations. And I really believe that is the task at hand, which is why I encourage everyone, military connected, to join Veterans for All Voters and be part of that solution. Was that, give me the critique, Alberto, and then we'll make Eric go.
I love it. It's great. I think that,
It's
again,
too
talking
long.
about,
Yeah.
well, it's hard. 30, 60 seconds is really hard. And
Yeah.
but talking about your military service, why this stuff matters, and then the call to action. Those are the 3 pieces for today, and we'll keep working on it. But over to Eric.
All right. That was great. That was great, TC. And thanks for everyone for being here. Real quick confession. I'm one of those guys on Zoom meetings like this, when they go to the breakout rooms, a lot of times I just leave. Please don't do that with us. This is just friendly practice with 3 or 4 fellow veterans.
It'll be short too.
And there's no pressure. It's going to be very short, and then we're going to come back and do some updates around the horn. So here's my 30-second pitch. I'm hitting start on the timer. So I'm Eric Brunner, a proud Navy veteran and a lifelong independent voter. I'm one of the 55% of post 9/11 veterans who's never identified as a Democrat or a Republican. I'm truly independent. And I believe there should be real competition and a level playing field in every single election. All voters, all candidates should have equal access to our ballots, because ballots belong to the people, not politicians. So join Veterans for All Voters. And I'm going to start running. That was great music, whoever.
Man.
Yeah, you just got played off the stage, Eric.
I was weepy, Eric. I was yawning during mine and weepy during yours. So that was outstanding.
All right, there we go.
Alberto, let's hear yours. Let's hear your 30-second. You're the pro at this.
I wish I'd actually spent some time thinking about my own. You know, I'm not going to put the timer on, Eric. But for me, you know, as a submariner, and you spend a lot of time in the military and in every part of the military, sitting around at midnight with a few people around you, talking about your life. And people come from all different backgrounds, all different faith beliefs. And I loved those moments so much, getting to know people who are so different from me. I missed those moments, and then transitioning to become a veteran, transitioning into my community in DC, and losing that. We all fall into these sort of bubbles, and the media tries to push us into this polarized landscape, but that's not who we are. We're those people who like to sit there at midnight talking about our very diverse backgrounds and where we came from.
I'm affiliated with a group called Veterans for All Voters.
I think we have someone with a hot mic. I can't. But anyways, so that brought me to this movement, trying to find like-minded veterans who miss those times and want to bring us together instead of accepting the norm that we are polarized and divided. I'm proud to be doing this work, and invite you to do it with us.
Don't reach out on this stuff, right?
Good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, let's do this. Let's do 5 minutes, just real short, but everyone kind of poke on this idea of values in your story. And I think those things are pretty unimpeachable. When you say, like, look, I believe Americans are good. I believe veterans are good. I believe that everyone ought to have a right to vote. Those things feel pretty unimpeachable. When we start arguing policies, it's easy to dismiss. values are hard to dismiss. So let's do a little rep on this. 5 minutes. Jameson, can you push us into small breakouts and then just have fun with it, guys and gals.
Let's do it.
And then we'll regroup and we'll take nominations for what you heard that you think was award winning or compelling.
I'm gonna do 5 breakout rooms.
Okay,
We do that.
there we go.
Right.
So just accept that room. Yeah, thanks.
All right. I think we're the leftovers, huh?
This is my Alaska. I was typing on my phone and I think I declined a push. So if you could shove me into a room, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, no worries. You're here. We hear you.
Oh, yeah. Are we in
Okay,
a
who
room?
wants to go in this? I don't know how many people are in this room, but I would love to hear just 30-second story, military background, why you joined VAV, why you're part of it. Go around the horn.
I'll go.
So-
I'm Darren Allen. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
Can you hear? Oh, Darren Allen, retired Army Reserve, retired as Lieutenant Colonel back in 07. But I was a reservist. So I really got my first retirement check 3 weeks ago. So why I joined this is everything that's going on politically is the antithesis of why we all serve. Preserve urban democracy, and everything that's happening now is just anti-democracy. That's from here.
Awesome. Who else wants to go? Yeah.
I'll go. Scott Konopasek, Army veteran, Cold War, first Gulf War. I got out of the Army in 93 and went on a search for another career, ended up becoming an election administrator for 30 years. I was the guy that candidates came to when they wanted to file. I was the guy who registered voters. I was the guy who printed ballots, issued ballots, counted the ballots. Went on TV and explained to everybody what was going on. I retired in 21 after, well, because of all the chaos going on with election denialism. I was just too old and got too tired, but I continued to try to be involved. I think one of the biggest challenges that our voting system has is the lack of choices for voters. I've been working with the Carter Center. I've been working with Veterans for All Voters. And in Virginia, in the odd years, we elect our state legislators. So this is an election year for the state legislature. And I realized that the person in the seat was going to be unopposed. And I started thinking about, I'm all about voters needing choices. Only one name on the ballot doesn't make democracy work. So with a little goading from my son, especially after I found out that the incumbent doesn't live in the district, I said, well, if nobody's going to do it, I'll do it. So I'm a candidate for the state legislature here in Virginia this year for the last 3 weeks because I couldn't stand to see voters not have a choice. It'll be an uphill slog. It's possible, but everything's possible, right? But voters deserve a choice. Voters. That's what ranked choice voting is all about. That's what we're all trying to do is give people a choice, a chance to express their opinions and their choice. So anyway, that's my story.
Awesome. All right, I'll give it a real fast one. I'm part of the org now. I was actually never into politics until I came to this org and realized how important um, this is for us. It's a political war zone, it feels like sometimes. Just the dysfunction and disagreement. I am always a believer of common ground. It doesn't matter if it has to do with religion or issues. And I feel like we just need common ground in our political system that we have right now. I've always been an independent voter. You know, I feel like I have beliefs on both sides, and it's hard for me to choose a party that ultimately fits or basically forcing me into a team. So I love the work that we're doing. I feel like we need to enfranchise more independent voters. I love being around military veterans. I feel like we have the ability to have real conversations with each other because there's a brother and sisterhood with veterans. I've noticed that, and I love the work that we're doing. And then I'll let someone else go before I bring everyone back. Unless anyone else can't talk in the room. Um, let me close the room so we'll bring us all back.
Oh man, that was awesome. Mike, you got cut off, but that was outstanding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike from Massachusetts.
Uh-huh.
That's awesome. Mike, thanks for being here. Mike's one of our newest VAV members up in Massachusetts. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Anything that you heard, I'd love to hear a nomination for a pitch or a expression that you heard that you thought was just really compelling.
I see John Keane. I see you have your hand up. Did you want to share something, brother?
So yeah, I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand in the breakout group, so I missed my turn. So I was wondering if I could just, give it real quick to the group
Yeah,
and maybe get
please.
some feedback. So
Yeah,
my name
fire
is John.
away.
Yeah, my name is John Keane. I'm the past state commander for the VFW in Colorado, and throughout my VFW career, we've taken pride in the fact that we are a nonpartisan organization. And every year we go up to the Capitol and we testify before a joint session of Congress where our commander in chief says he's there representing 1.4 million VFW members and auxiliary members. And I realized that at least half of those people he's representing don't get to participate in the primaries. And I think that's just extremely unfair. So that's why I support, in particular, the Let America Vote Act. And I would hope that you would support similar legislation in your own states and have your elected representatives co-sponsor that bill. Thank you.
Outstanding, John.
It's fire.
That was great. That was awesome. We heard some great
Thanks.
ones in ours, some relating to service in Iraq and the tribal divisions that they see there and how that trains them to come home and see it play out in our own country. Some related to people on active duty right now not being able to sort of express themselves, and how the integrity and the leadership that we hold, frankly, take for granted on active duty is then so absent in how we see political leadership expressed. So I don't know. There's no one answer to this, but I think all of us coming at this from a place of our own authority, which is anchored in our values, I think is how we move this movement forward. I mean, what we know for sure is that last time trying to dive into the mechanics of a top 4 election model is challenging, and people don't necessarily get it. And then the retort is, that's too much complexity. Let's move on. And it's hard to kind of come back from that. A value statement like, I believe every American ought to be able to vote and participate in their taxpayer-funded elections, and it shouldn't require loyalty to a party, feels pretty unimpeachable. So anyway, Eric, anything else you want to say on this before we get into?
I don't think so. Just, I heard some great ones in my breakout as well. And it just, people sharing from their own personal experience. Authenticity is always the key, right? And your story is your story. So, but I heard some good stuff.
Yeah. Outstanding. Okay. Let's pivot. I want to do a little show and tell, because I think you all will appreciate this. For part of our strategic plan for this year is like, we've got to really 10x our digital game. If any of you have ever given money to a candidate, you know just how aggressive both political parties are, and then texting you and asking you for more. Independents are largely sort of targeted in a lot of respects. And so there are some new things happening in the data world writ large. Part of what we're up against is a data duopoly that the two parties hold. There's NGP, there's WinRed, there's ActBlue, there are sort of systems at play that help entrench the two political parties, and therefore kind of partisan interests. And what we're trying to do is build a new audience of registered independents, military veterans, those that have propensity to see this as a system issue and might be inclined towards reform. And there are some new companies coming online, AI, other tools being leveraged to help find new data sets of registered independents and then activate them. And so we are in the early days of working with Murmuration, Break the Vote, some other organizations to get data sets and target who we think could be volunteers, who we think could be advocates, and try to onboard them into our work. So I just want to give you guys a preview of what we're learning in Georgia, which is where we started our beta test. And my vision is really, and Eric's is like, if we figure this out in a place like Georgia, we need to scale it to all 50 states and build this into a 1 million person movement, not just, the dozens of us that are able to kind of come together on these calls. So with that, Jameson, if you can just give us like 8 minutes of airtime on what we launched in Georgia, so you guys just get a sense of kind of other efforts that are underway in support of our mission and the work that you all are doing.
Sure. Sounds good. Okay. So this is an experiment for us, and we're really trying to understand what type of messaging resonates with different audiences. For Georgia specifically, we were a bit limited on the type of data points that we could get, so we weren't able to really hone down the messaging based on their political party or their support of ranked choice voting or anything else. So this initial test was really just to see if they support a veteran-based organization. And we used 2 different messages and did an A/B test. And the 3 goals for this were just to understand the effectiveness of text-based. This is the first time we've done it at the organization. I know I get texts often and I don't even look at them. So that's one of the big challenges with this thing, is to try to create messaging that almost grabs their attention immediately. And I think with better data sets in future states that we do this in, we'll be able to really hone in on the thing that grabs them. It's very emotional based, or it could just be something that they're really interested in. We just know that through data set. So the goal number 2 is understanding the message performance. We wanted to see which one resonated better with what type of audience. And then for me to develop an operational cadence for when we do it in the future and how we streamline it. So it's easy for us to execute if, there's a bill trying to get passed in Pennsylvania, for instance, we can shoot it to Pennsylvania voter files. We can get them to reach out to their local reps or whatever we want the call to action to be. So that's what we're looking at. For Georgia, we hyper targeted this down to 42,000 individuals, and it was based on a model score that they support ranked choice voting. The 2 segmented groups that essentially allowed us to split half and half was ages 18 through 57, and then from 57 to 70. Each one of those segment groups got 2 different messages, which I'll show you. Oh. And this is actually the call to action that they would go to once looking at the text message. And it's very tailored around Georgia. So the first message was right here at the top. It basically said, flawed elections weaken democracy. Georgia military veterans are stepping up. Join Veterans for All voters to restore trust and fairness. We created the frame, the tone, the strength, and the weakness of this message. The second message was Georgia military veterans know leadership, lead again. So one of them is more focused on their military, being a leader in the military. The other one is more around flawed elections and democracy. What we found from this list through this after the campaign ended was that segment group 2, ages 58 through 70, were the ones that were more engaged with this campaign. And message A, which was the one that talks about flawed elections, go back to that. That was the one that actually resonated with them, surprisingly. We actually thought it was going to be more around military leadership because we were targeting veterans. So very surprising. We had a number of volunteers sign up because of that. A lot of them replied back, you can reply stop. You don't want to get the message anymore. What we're going to do, and these are the lessons learned for future, is to segment messaging by age and political affiliation. It sounds kind of counterintuitive because we're a nonpartisan organization or a bipartisan organization. But when you create messaging around their current political party, if they're not independent or even if they are, they somehow seem to gravitate towards that a lot more. There were individuals that saw the word democracy, for instance, in that message, and they instantly didn't want to get involved with it. The second recommendation is to personalize these around other veterans speaking up, drive urgency to specific bills. That's what I mentioned earlier in the call. And then leveraging peer influence around veteran testimonials. So that's something that we're doing right now. We're trying to collect a lot more stories and testimonials, which we could essentially use to help recruit volunteers that might want to be a part of the organization and be a part of other like-minded veterans. So that's kind of the overview of this thing. We're learning a lot in this text-based, and we're going to be able to hone in our messages a lot better based on the demographics.
Awesome. Good stuff. I mean, look, we're scratching the surface. We want to test messaging, which is personified. So pictures of people, you all who are leading the fight. We didn't do that. This is all text-based. We want to personify, frankly, potentially some bad guys. Hey, look at state rep so-and-so who is trying to make it harder for you to vote in the elections, even, just because you won't refuse loyalty to a political party. So we'll be experimenting with a lot of this values frames. And we're excited because the data is getting better. There's more access to it than there's been. We'll be able to sort of evolve our messaging, not just A/B testing, but A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And ultimately, what we want is like a suite of messages on a shelf, so we can say, as a bad bill is coming through Alabama, or a good bill is coming through New Mexico, we can sort of turn on a dime, target veterans in those places, and then, turn on 1,000 phone calls to elected officials to say, this is, you ought to do this or you should not do this. So I think that, you know, we've got to build that capability. We don't ever want to lose what we have here, which is you all as leaders who are identified by state. I mean, our dream scenario is that we have a list of 10,000 veterans in every state, and then 5 to 10 really solid, engaged volunteer leaders in every state. If we can do those two things, big wide end of the funnel, as well as sort of a cadre of folks who are on the website identified, we think that that is, you know, and it would unlock an incredible superpower for us as an organization. Chris Ronis, over to you, brother.
Hey, Todd, I don't get to dial in as often as I'd like to, but I just wanted you guys to know I'm still working out here in South Dakota, and I wanted to share a quick story because maybe it's value added. I spent a lot of time talking with folks after we had our Amendment H that did not pass in South Dakota. And I talked with a lot of folks, just asking them, you know, why, help me understand what didn't you get? What did you miss? Whatever. And at the end of the day, South Dakota is a state that is super patriotic, super pro-veteran, pro-military, pro-America, and they're also super pro-Republican. There are Democrats in the cities like anywhere. And so we do have a great kind of variance there. But what I noticed was they were always grateful to say, you know, hey, thanks for your service. We love that you're doing this. But we're just always going to stick with the party because we don't want the party to get compromised by opening up this kind of a door. And my response to them, which was a huge value added, was eye-opening, was, well, I appreciate that you're grateful for the service that I was willing to provide and being willing, along with many of my other veteran peers, to dedicate our lives and possibly to death to serve this country. But you don't value that enough to allow me to have a vote? And their response was like, you know, very like, oh crap, yeah, I'm willing to let you die for my country, but I'm not willing to let you vote for it. You're right, that doesn't make sense. That's kind of how it came across. And I've had that conversation at least a dozen times. It was very well received, and it really got them thinking differently, and it engaged a completely more positive conversation about what we're trying to do. So I just want to share that. That's
great, Switch. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's the place of integrity. You know, it's just that, it's my lived experience. I ought to be able to vote. We ought to have choices when we vote. Let's do one other, David, and then we'll get into some campaign stuff. Yeah.
Hey, brothers, sisters. So I had one thought, and maybe it's going to tie some of this stuff back in, just like the gentleman who just spoke. I really appreciated what Jameson shared, because as we were going through the breakout groups and listening to you and Eric, the thing that resonated or that came to mind was that we ought to continue to be curious. If I give my pitch to somebody, it may or may not resonate with them. Just like the gentleman just said, I'm sorry, I don't know everybody's name, but just like he said, like, hey, they're grateful, but they got their own story. They got their own challenges. And we as a group ought to be nimble enough to be curious about how the political system is affecting them, allow that to resonate with us, connect it then to our story, and say, look, your story resonates with me. You've told me mine resonates with you. Let's do something together. But we've got to come from a place of being curious about the people we're trying to reach. If we're just making an elevator pitch in one direction, and I don't think that's what anybody was trying to do. I just want to amplify that we need to be as curious about the people we're trying to reach as we want them to be about us.
Could not agree more. I could not agree more. In fact, part of what we talk about a lot, and I don't think it quite came through in this conversation, but it's just that it's like, if the two political parties and political candidates are always in the business of telling you to do something for them, the counter to that is listening to them. You know, so like if we're the one organization that's like, what do you think? That stands in stark contrast to how they otherwise feel treated by the political system. And so I do think that's right, David. And I think the other thing that I would say is, you know, we're gonna expand our issue set a little bit to talk about money and politics and other things, because, you know, part of what we want to be is, the first thing we want to be is a home for veterans who want a constructive place to find solutions to a broken political system. And we shouldn't be defensive over intellectual exploration of like other things besides Final Five voting or Final Four voting, things that we care about. Like we welcome intellectual exploration, which again is sort of in contrast to how the parties treat you. Every one of the things that we're talking about is we want interactions with us, even if it's a text message, to make you smarter, not and more clear, frankly, and not just outraged and more dumb. Most political communication is I'm more outraged as a result, and I'm actually less informed as a result. So how do we become sort of the antidote to that, the counterpoint to that? And I think we got a lot of work to do. I mean, we're even thinking about, one of the things I'm planning to do is read the US Constitution long form. It takes about 50 minutes. And then just to put it across social channels, just to start a conversation. Hey, you know, if you're curious what's in the Constitution, I read it, and tune in. And that kind of long form content, you know, it's a text with a click and a link, but like then it takes you to a video that's maybe really substantive. So we have a lot of work to do to build the plane to get to the place where we can actually do that kind of stuff. But I think our aspiration is deep and substantive and calm and relational, which will in and of itself, apart from the message itself, will stand in stark contrast to, I think, how people otherwise feel communicated to by politicians in the political system. So thanks for elevating that, David. Great point. Eric Bronner, you want to take it home?
Yeah, so
yeah,
we're going to go around the horn real quick on some campaign updates. Real quick, a small win and then a big win to celebrate. The small win, we've needed VAV leaders in West Virginia and North Dakota for a couple of years now. We think we have our first VAV leader in West Virginia. We're going to onboard them within the next couple of weeks. We're still looking for someone in North Dakota. That's a huge need. The big win, so the small win is having someone in West Virginia. The big win is New Mexico. I don't know if you all have been tracking, but they passed via legislation semi-open primaries. And we wanted to give a little time to Frank, a Marine Corps veteran, correct?
Yes.
Frank Smith is a Marine Corps veteran in New Mexico. He and Claudia Reisner have been leading the charge there. They were working with our partners. And Frank, if you can just give us an update on, you know, how the win came about and maybe any takeaways that you'd recommend for other folks working in legislative states.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. So we have published Senate Bill 16 this legislative session. It passed the state Senate 27-11. The House squeaked by at 36-33, and then the governor signed it into law about 2 weeks ago. And what it is, it's our semi-open primaries. Now, New Mexico is a little bit unique in that, you know, we have a part-time legislature. They don't even get paid. They meet 30 days 1 year and 60 days the next. So next year they'll meet for 30 days, and that can only address budget issues. So if we wouldn't have passed this bill this session, it would have been 2 more years. It's taken 10 years to get this bill approved. And really, one of the big things is this has been a broad-based effort with advocacy groups like New Mexico Votes First, New Mexico Open Primary Election, or New Mexico Open Elections, VAV, young voting groups throughout the state. I mean, it's been a really broad-based effort. So on this, opposition primarily came from the Republican Party. Their biggest concern was the potential for crossover voting and the erosion of party integrity. And it's been a sort of an incremental deal that's been going on. In 2019, to try to address some of the things with respect to the closed primary system that we had, the legislature passed same-day voter registration. So you could go in you could change your voter registration when you were voting in the primary to either Democrat or Republican. You could vote in that, and then you could change your voter registration back to independent. That was their kind of workaround. But one of the really good things that came out of that was one of the bill's sponsors said that when she would testify with the other committees, she said that veteran told her, "Why do I have to lie and say that I'm a Republican or a Democrat in order to vote in a primary?" And that was one of the really compelling arguments, I think, that really reached a lot of the legislators in this particular session, was, having the fact that the veteran having to say, yeah, because some of the opposition was, well, listen, independents can vote in the primary. All they have to do is just go down, change your registration, and then they vote, and then they can change it back. But that really kind of helped to defeat that argument right there. So that was one of the really good things about that. And the other, like I was saying, this took 10 years here in New Mexico to get this done. And now, we'll move on to the next thing, having open primaries and stuff, and eventually ranked choice voting, but this is going to take a long time. And I think kind of the big takeaways was it can be a long process, and don't give up. And the second is it's a broad-based process. New Mexico does have a lot of veterans. We have about 8% of our population are veterans and stuff. So anyway, that's kind of like a little good news from that, so thank you.
Awesome work, Frank. That's a huge win for the movement and the 300,000 plus independent voters who in New Mexico are called decline to state. It's my favorite name for independent voters. It's a way to brand us like we don't exist. Decline to state, DTS. I know we have 1 or 2 minutes left. We're probably not going to have time to go around the horn to other folks. Real quick, some other states that are hot right now. Pennsylvania, we've mentioned, has 1.35 million independent voters. They have closed primaries. We're hoping Pennsylvania becomes the next New Mexico. There is a bipartisan bill for semi-open primaries. We have a brand new leader, a Marine Corps veteran, outstanding leader, Dennis Miller, in Pennsylvania, who's going to be leading the charge. So we're going to really be building our effort in PA. And then 2 ballot initiative states. Oklahoma, there's ballot question 836. It already exists. And because it exists, the state legislature has a bill they're looking at today to make it harder to gather signatures on this existing ballot measure because they don't want it to pass. So if you know folks in Oklahoma, tell them to testify against Senate Bill 1027, which would make it nearly impossible to get this ballot question for top 2 open primaries on the ballot in 2026. But we're still working in Oklahoma. And then Michigan's a state that's going to try to do statewide ranked choice voting, maybe like Maine via ballot initiative, signature gathering starting in Michigan. So that's another state we're going to want to ramp up soon. So Pennsylvania, Oklahoma, Michigan right now are hot. There's other states where in the past month, we've submitted testimony in 7+ different states. And so there's a lot going on. We appreciate all the good work you're doing. Appreciate Wayne gave us some great intel. He's at MIT and a congressman was speaking there today. Wayne sent us some messages that were super helpful. So if you gather intel in your state or you meet with a legislature, please pass that along because we collect and gather all that information. So we really appreciate every single one of you building this mission with us. Todd, I don't know if you have any closing inspiration or music you want to play.
I just want to say it was Justin Trudeau's parting comment as he stepped down as prime minister. Literally, interviewer asked him, what was your one regret? And he said, I wish that we had allowed voters in Canada to rank multiple candidates. It literally was his parting shot. They're having their own polarization crisis. I believe the Emmys use ranked choice voting in their selection. And I believe the new Pope will be chosen through using ranked choice voting. Was my understanding, a form of it in the conclave. So anyway, as is Robert's Rule of Order, as do most corporations. So this notion that we're trying to do something really wild and out there is just sort of not true. It's actually best practices. Robert's Rule of Order recommends it for a productive decision-making process. So stay smart, learn to communicate using your values. We are super grateful for you. Bring 1 or 2 friends if you can to this fight. Try to bring someone of the opposite sex and someone that maybe doesn't look like you, or someone that is a little older or a little younger, maybe politically thinks differently than you. Like, please bring diversity into this group. And I truly believe this is the group that's going to make it happen. I mean, we have sort of visibility to this national democracy reform movement, and it is sort of amazing to us that there's a lot of angst and conversation, but not a lot of people on the ground. And we are looked to as one of the only organizations that has real bodies on the ground in states across the country. So please don't underestimate the role that you're playing, and reach out to us if we can be helpful. We are incredibly grateful for you all and what you do. So we will continue on.
Onward. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.